The second of our 3 teachings tonight is called The Rules of Love and Logic. And before we get into that teaching, Mom, I'd like to try and address an elephant in the room. We briefly touched on it in the last teaching, but there's this trend in our culture right now, is sometimes referred to as gentle parenting. I've seen a lot of that. And not always, because sometimes it's a really great concept, but sometimes it refers to parenting where we're more friendly with our kids and we're less assertive. We don't have any boundaries. And I think that just in the conversations that I've had, that is especially sometimes frustrating to fathers, but frustrating to all of us. I know it's come up even with me and Brian in our conversations, because in general, and this is just a generalization, moms are more naturally compassionate and gentle, except for when they are on our last nerve. But and then in general, I think dads are maybe a little more, they prefer that kind of assertive, what we call drill sergeant parenting, but there's just something in them that prefers to be a little more authoritative. And so it's frustrating if any one of us is believing that we're supposed to be parenting in a way that doesn't garner respect from our children. And so what I want to ask you as we go into this is, as you apply these principles that we're talking about tonight, do we have to forfeit that, when I tell them to do something, they do it? Is that something that we shouldn't be trying to attain in our homes? How does?
No, it absolutely does not mean we forfeit respect. But a lot of it has to do with modeling in our homes too. If we're getting after our children for swearing and we're doing the swearing, if we swear like a sailor and then we give them consequences for swearing, it doesn't go very well. So when we model that behavior, that respect comes. And giving them that love that isn't fake, if everything they did was great, and we don't have to tell them, that picture isn't really a good likeness of me, nothing like that. But if we give them those affirmations for everything they do, everything, you walked in a perfect line. Who cares? But some parents are just so over the top, just, everything they do is just perfect. Like I am with my grandkids. I clap for everything they do. So we don't want to do that, and we don't have to sacrifice the respect. And I will say that because fathers have usually the lower voice, I think you'll notice in a lot of families, the father has control and the mother gets very frustrated because she's like, I told them to go to bed, and then dad just comes in and they just go right to bed. And it gets very frustrating, but it doesn't have to be a yelling, it's just the lower voice tone. So it can be very mild and neutral. Mommy said go to bed, but it's in a low tone. And we respond to that, don't we? We absolutely do. So we don't have to give up that respect. Does that kind of answer where you're going?
Yeah, it does. So I think what I'm hearing you say is it's less about, oh man, I don't like that answer. It's less about making them respect us and more about being someone worth respecting.
Exactly, earned and not demanded. Yeah.
Right. We have talked about that though. That's not fair, because I try not to yell, but I'll be like, Brindley Brave, go to bed right now because I said so. And my husband can, from down the stairs and across the house, be like, Brindley.
Yep.
That's not fair.
It isn't.
But we work with what we've got.
That's right.
So the next few handouts are what are going to comprise this teaching here. And so I want you to turn the one that's literally called The Rules of Love and Logic. And we're going to ask Mom, would you explain to us the rules of love and logic?
Okay. Adults set firm limits in loving ways without anger, lecture, or threats. Adults set firm limits in loving ways without anger, lecture, or threats. Without anger, lecture, or threats. None of them. So we use our neutral voice. We have to use our neutral voice. A child cannot handle when they can make your head spin. They're just sitting there watching your head spin and the steam come out of your ears and going, wow, I did that.
And that's true. That is true of every age?
Pretty much, yes, it really is. Yeah, and when they get to teens, they really enjoy it. They really enjoy watching your head spin, you know? It's just, it really is their part-time job because they don't have a whole lot else to do. No, I know you're my favorite. You guys are my favorites.
Okay. So rule number 1, without anger or threats. And then what is I know rule number 2 is kind of broken up into several pieces, but what's rule number 2?
Yes. When a child causes a problem, the adult hands it back to the child in loving ways. So, in a loving way, the adult holds the child accountable for the solving of his or her problems in a way that does not make a problem for others. Children are offered choices with limits. Adults use enforceable statements. Adults provide delayed, extended consequences, and the adult's empathy is locked in before the consequences are delivered. So we need to keep that love and empathy locked in order to get through to the child. When we go to our child with anger, the child turns their anger toward us and does not learn any lesson that we were trying to get across. So at any moment, if we use that anger, they put that anger right back on us, and there was a really good lesson that could have been learned. For instance, a child makes a good choice that the mother has been nagging them for weeks to make, and then so the child made a good choice, and in the end, it took them a while, but they made a good choice, and in the end, the mother says, see, I told you that was the best decision. And so then now the child has not learned the lesson. The child is now angry with the parent. Wow. So we don't want to nag, we don't want to use that anger. All those lessons go out the window, and now we have to wait for the next opportunity to have a lesson learned.
This page alone just really excites me because there's several phrases there that you might be wondering about. We're gonna flesh out more about enforceable statements and delayed consequences and empathy. But for this session, we're focusing on the connection between setting limits and offering choices. And I think that for me, at least when I read those with no context, it kind of seems like they're at odds with each other. Like, am I supposed to be setting limits or am I supposed to be giving them choices? Right. And so I've tried to come up with a couple of examples just to get us into the right headspace of ages and stages, but my kids are under 5 right now. I have a lot of little one examples. So just kind of think about this in terms of your child, but when we're thinking about limits, there are things that our kids have to do, like they have to buckle in the car. And so thinking of limits, it might feel like my only choice is to say you have to buckle in, and if you don't, I'm gonna yell, I'm gonna threaten, I'm gonna punish, or I'm gonna physically force them to buckle in. Because when I think of choices, I think you're kind of saying like, would you rather be buckled in or would you rather not be buckled in? And that's not gonna work. No. But another option that really has come up a lot as I've kind of talked to people is that parents without any limits might just stop going anywhere. Like they might just stop going places where they need to drive because they just don't wanna fight with the kid, and that's not gonna work either. And so how, in that situation, how am I supposed to offer choices while firmly setting limits in a loving way?
Yes. We always are okay with any choices that we offer. So would you like to buckle yourself in, or would you like mom to do it for you? We're okay with either one, and whichever they choose, we don't go, because that's not the one you didn't want. We're happy to do it. If they say, I want you to do it, mommy. Okay. You know what? Maybe they're having a bad day. Sometimes kids are on the verge of getting sick and you don't even know it. They're having a bad day. We have bad days as adults. Kids have bad days. So sometimes they do just need a little extra attention. I want you to do it, mommy. Cool. I'll get you buckled in, no problem. But we haven't offered the we're not going anywhere solution, or we're not going to drive against the law, right? So another solution would be, would you like to buckle in and go to the store with me, or would you like to stay in your room since Dad's home? So either one you're totally okay with. And don't get upset if they choose to stay in their room. Sometimes they do that. I had a child just the other day. I said, would you like to adjust your attitude, or would you like me to adjust it for you? And he said, I want you to adjust it for me. I said, cool. Bonnie knows what I'm talking about. I said, cool. We came in from the restroom and he didn't get to do the stuff that all the other kids were doing. And for just a couple minutes. And I just gave one sentence, Jad. Oh, shoot.
No, I knew who you were talking about.
I'm so sorry.
Because you have, what do you have, 5 female grandchildren and 1 male?
Shoot, sorry. Would you like, or I said, remember when you said that you wanted me to adjust your attitude? Yeah. Okay, so you're going to sit here and take some time and think about that. Wow. Okay, and it was just a few minutes. He's 5, he's just turned 5 this week. And so just a few minutes to think about it. And a lot of times kids appreciate a timeout. Don't we need a timeout sometimes? Mm-hmm. So sometimes they will choose to go to their room, and there's nothing wrong with that. So we never offer anything that is something that we won't be happy with. Whatever choices are given, we're happy with. Would you like the blue outfit or the red outfit? Mm-hmm. I want the yellow outfit. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess you don't want to make that decision. I'll make it for you.
Wow, okay. So that's kind of step 2, is if they're trying to step outside of the choices that we're offering, then they forfeited their opportunity to make a choice.
Yes, and I got ahead. Sorry about that.
No, but thank you. Yeah. Okay, so I really did want it, because we have a lot of parents with older kids or about to be older kids too. And so we're on a car theme. So a teenager that's driving has to have car insurance. It's like against the law not to. I feel like nobody mentions that when you're about to get your license. Right. They're like, oh, you got a car and car insurance. And so thinking about limits, obviously the kid needs car insurance because it's a safety issue. It's an issue of obeying the law. But if the kid isn't paying for insurance or won't make the call to set it up or whatever, because we're trying to raise kids that are able to do those things, you can't force them to. So does that mean the only options are to get it for them, or to yell and scream at them until they do it, or let them decide not to have car insurance? Like, what is the love and logic approach to that?
Right, and I'm sure you remember, and all my kids remember, that we are Steins, and it's a privilege to be a Stein. And Steins have certain standards. So, whatever your last name is, it's a privilege to be in your home, and there are certain standards we have, and one is certainly obeying the law. So I would say something like, I'll be happy to give you the keys as soon as you get your insurance for the car, and let me know if you need any help with that. And then walk away. Do not remind them. Don't nag them. It's their choice. And don't be the chauffeur either. And that's all the better if you live out in the country, because they can't get anywhere without you, correct? Wow. So don't be their chauffeur either. Don't make it easy for them to not get going on something. That doesn't mean if they need to get to, especially like a church activity, something very important, that we don't take them all the time, but we're not their chauffeur, drop everything so that they can get somewhere that they want to go. Sure. So we don't want to smooth the path for them to not do what they need to be doing.
I'm so sorry, because it's not on the notes, but I have to ask, because you brought up something that really matters. So they bought the car.
Yes.
How do possessions work in the scheme of this? It's their car. It's their. What I hear a lot is it's their phone, which is never really true, because I don't know any teenagers that are actually paying, but it doesn't matter. Never mind. But it's their. Even it's their blankie. It's their. Whatever. So in possessions, how does that work? Like, it's theirs, but they're yours.
Well, for instance, in the car situation, you could be liable if they drive around without insurance. They hit somebody, there's a lawsuit, you lose your home, you lose everything, and that would be a terrible thing. So obviously, we don't break the law, and we don't make decisions that affect other people. That could just rob the family blind. We wouldn't have anything left. But if they buy their own boom box and they choose to put it at the decibel that, puts everybody deaf, boom box is really dating me, isn't
so
it?
sorry.
So dating me. Yes.
Bluetooth speaker, sure.
Yeah. Okay, so they're playing their music at way too high of a decibel, then that's a decision that impacts others. And we have to know that in a safe space, that, we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as long as we don't hurt others in the process, right? So that's what happens in our family as well. We do not hurt others in the process. So because that's impacting our family, we couldn't get this and that done with that loud of music. Unfortunately, we'll confiscate the radio and we'll be happy to return it when they decide to put it at a decibel that is bearable for the parents.
That delineation actually helps me personally a lot. So I think what I'm hearing you say is we as parents have the authority over whatever they own, whatever they possess, but you're saying don't use that authority unless it's infringing on someone else, whether it's you or the general public, or so is that kind of...
At this moment, I can't think of a reason to, but if they're using something inappropriately for themselves, hurting others, using something inappropriately, we need to respect. That's another thing that Stein's learned, to respect others' things, our things, especially if you have to learn to pay for things yourself, you have a lot more respect for things than if you're just given everything.
Sure. Well, thank you. That helped me. We're gonna have more questioning. I'm just kind of taking advantage of my microphone. But okay, so we're gonna ask, first I'm gonna ask you if you would explain the difference between, and this is kind of big and foundational for Love and Logic, the difference between a natural consequence and a logical consequence, because they kind of have two different ideas there.
I'm over 50 now and I have to use glasses. Frustrating. Okay, so a natural consequence is the child forgets their jacket and they're cold. A lot of parents will not do this because they're so afraid of what the teacher will think, what other parents will think, and I want to encourage you to parent the way that you and your spouse decide to, with God's help, and don't let anybody sway you any other way. Parental bullies have no bearing, thank you, no bearing over you. You make your decision and live with it. Don't let anybody bully you into parenting in a different way. One example, Trinity was the only one that had a bottle for a little while because I was expecting Kyra and the doctor didn't want me to be expecting and nursing Trinity. And so we had to put her on a bottle for a little while. And she needed that comfort. And she was doing good, but she was probably 18 months, definitely not too old for a bottle. But I heard somebody say something about it, and I took the bottle away from you. And that was just awful. She needed that comfort. She had already been taken away from nursing, and I did that out of being bullied. That is just terrible to do something like that out of being bullied. So you hold strong. Whatever it is that you guys decide is the right way to do it, you hold strong and do it. Don't let anybody influence you, not even your parents. If you don't like the way that they make decisions, then don't even let them sway you. And don't be afraid to say, thank you, but I don't need your opinion. It's okay. I don't care who it is. Thank you, I didn't ask for your opinion. Thank you, I don't need that right now. Whatever you need to say, but it is your right. If they're gonna be bold and, dare I say, rude enough to tell you how to parent, then you can be bold enough to tell them you didn't ask for that. Wow. So don't do it out of being bullied.
That's a good word.
Don't worry about it. If the child, we're not living in the Midwest. If our children grew up in the Midwest and snow was seriously so high that they had to put reflectors 12 feet up high on the fire hydrants so that they could find them in the event of an emergency. That's how high the snow could get. So, that wouldn't work in the Midwest. But here, you forget your jacket and you're a little chilly, the child is going to survive, right? So don't worry if they're a little bit chilly, and don't worry if Mrs. So-and-so calls and says, Johnny didn't come to school with a jacket on today. You can tell her, you know what, I believe in love and logic, and I believe in natural consequences, and I bet he was cold today, but I bet he'll remember his jacket tomorrow. Thank you for informing me. I appreciate it. See you tomorrow. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to parent your child how you decide it needs to be done. Another natural consequence, if a child goes around bossing all the other kids on the playground and ends up with no friends, that's a natural consequence. And you don't want to be the helicopter parent that calls all the other parents and says, come on, you guys got to be nice to Susie. You got to get your child to be nice to Susie. Now Susie understands, if I'm bossy, I don't have any friends. I better change my behavior. And then when they come to you, you're very empathetic. And you're sorry that she's going through that. And you leave it up to her, but you also offer, that must be really rough. If you have any questions, I'm here. I'm always here if you have any questions. So you're empathetic, and if she can't figure out a way to fix it, you're there as a consultant, but you're not there as a drill sergeant. Okay, now a logical consequence was you broke sister's toy. Now you need to earn enough money to pay for a replacement for sister's toy. That's a logical consequence. Another logical consequence is the child goofed off on the way to school and is late for school, and they're asking you for a note for the teacher. You don't give the child a note, and you just say, oh, I hope you and Mrs. So-and-so work that out. Have a good day. And if they get detention, you are so backing that teacher. Thank you, Mrs. L. Thank you for giving them detention. I believe in love and logic, and that consequence might help him to get to school on time next time. I appreciate that. So we are for the teacher. We are not against the teacher.
So, first of all, I look like I'm really deep in my feelings right now. Like, this is just really touching
her in
me.
her
Yeah,
feels.
my allergies are hitting me so hard. I apologize. So I'm just going to weep through this.
Yes.
But so main difference between natural and logical, then what I'm hearing you is natural is it just is naturally occurring, and logical is when it connects to the situation. It makes sense to connect.
Right.
And
So we helped to produce that. For instance, saying, okay, how can we make that right? Yes, I do think that replacing sister's toy is appropriate, and how are you going to earn that money for that? That's a great idea. I think we could do that. You could earn some money by sweeping and just encouraging them, helping them to make those decisions and encouraging that. So that is logical.
So those of us with really young kids, there are some natural consequences that we can allow and some that we can't. And so we need those logical consequences, just meaning like they're constantly trying to kill themselves. And so those logical consequences are super helpful. But for every age, we're trying to empower them. And I heard you say this earlier, to make good choices now so that when they're making bigger and weightier choices, they have the tools they need to choose wisely. And so you have this next handout here that's called Guidelines for Sharing Control Through Choices. And I'm going to ask you to take us through those rules for choices, but also to give us some examples, because I'm just stuck in thinking about little kids, but I know that you're saying these choices are good for all ages.
Yes, absolutely. We've said this before, but never give a choice on an issue that might cause a problem for you or for anyone else. Have you ever grounded your child and realized you're grounded too? Some people call it restriction here. I grew up in the Midwest, they called it grounding. What do you guys call it here? Grounding, okay, cool. Then you realize I can't go anywhere either, especially if you have a child that's younger. That doesn't work. So never ever give a consequence that is going to cause you a problem. It always needs to give the child a problem, not you. For each choice, only give 2 options, each of which you're okay with. You don't care which outfit they choose or whatever. It doesn't affect you. You're happy either way. If the child doesn't decide in 10 seconds, decide for him or her. Because, this is Keeley's version, delay is passive-aggressive control. You're already giving them control by letting them have some options and choices. So when they delay, that is just passive-aggressive control. So now you say, okay, I guess you wanted mommy to make the decision, so I choose, and you make the decision for them, whether they like it or not. And no, I wanted the other one. Next time, I hope that you'll let me know quicker. That'll work out better for you. Notice that was only 2 sentences. We didn't lecture. Only give choices that fit in with your value system, and this is slightly extreme, but you don't say, well, would you like to talk to the friend that you offended, or would you rather just sock them in the nose? That's not going to work. That doesn't work with your value system. So don't give them a choice that you're not okay with, that doesn't work with your value system. And do not under any circumstances assume that they will not choose the one that you're giving out of sarcasm, because they will. They absolutely will.
We've been doing this for a long time, Brian and I have, because you kind of took us through this before we had children. And so we like to really Dad talked about letting that pressure out somehow by sarcastically giving each other choices. Mm-hmm. But our kids hear us do that, and I'm like, would you like to be a butthead, or would you like to stop being a butthead? And they're like, Daddy, what are you gonna do?
Oh my goodness.
The marriage conference is next month.
Some things just need to be let out.
They sure do. So could you give us maybe, I know you kind of did there, but maybe a couple of examples of, or maybe a lot of examples if you have them, but of some choices that we can give? Because like the coat thing, it really is hard to, when you're in the phase of like they need to wear a coat, to think about choices within that, or the seatbelt thing. So what are some choices we can give?
So a really good one is, would you like to carry your coat or wear your coat? I hear my kids use that quite often with their kids, and that way they have it with them in case there's an emergency. The bus breaks down, they at least have it with them. You know that they have it with them. That's a choice that could be made. Or you can just, would you like to take your coat or not take your coat? Simple things too, like we major on the minors, get your socks on, then get your shoes on. Do you want socks today or no socks? Who cares? Don't major on the minors. We do that a lot. This one I really like, because I grew up in a time where you ate everything on your plate because people are starving in China. Yeah. So I like this one. Every one of my children had maybe 1 or 2 items that they couldn't get down. What was yours, Trin?
Pineapple.
Yeah. And I made you eat it, and I feel terrible. But that was before Love and Logic. I didn't understand that it was just like a, what's the word?
Sensory
thing. She just couldn't do it. And she was not a picky child. 1 or 2 things that I can't eat black-eyed peas. I'll die before I eat those things. Everybody has at least a couple things that they don't care to eat. So let your child be an individual. So I love this one about, would you like peas or carrots for dinner as your vegetable? Mm-hmm. So you are having a vegetable. Which one would you like? Mm-hmm. So you know that they have been given the health that they need for that day, but they get to choose.
That's good.
Another one that I like for teenagers, since we don't use those very often, kids like to have their own sense of clothing, especially in their teenage years. And so...
we should have had pictures ready.
Right? I love this concept, and I did not do this. I'll have to admit that to you, because I didn't really fully grasp it till later. But when you go back to school clothes shopping, You can give your child a budget that you were going to spend for, so this has to be teenagers. You can't do this with 5-year-olds, okay? But you give them a budget and you say, everything for your school year you need to get with this budget. And you leave it alone. You let them pick it out. So if they get 12 pairs of jeans, 1 top, they didn't get any new underwear this year, and they forgot shoes, guess what? Hoping grandma sends you something for Christmas.
Wow.
Yeah. They forgot a coat. Yikes. But guess last year's is gonna have to do. So, but they got to choose. And don't die on the little hills. Save the big hills, because it took me a while, but I got to the point where I said, I don't care if you wear blue eyeshadow. I don't care if you have pink hair. And they got to the point where they really hardly ever did that. And that was after you went to college, unfortunately. And I got to the point where I realized that's not a hill to die on. But then when they wanted to wear the Daisy Dukes, it was like, no. So, you know, you give them choices within reason. So if you don't die on every hill, your no means something. But if you die on every little hill, your no doesn't mean anything. It's just like, my mom and dad are so mean. They never let me do anything. So your no means nothing.
I gotta write it down. I'm so sorry. But
Oh, I have to give one more. When we moved here, we had never had to have such an early be to school time. I think school, the earliest it started was 8:30 where we were from. And when we moved here, the high schoolers had to be there at 7:30. Is that right? 7:30. 7:25. We had to be there then. And I was making the kids go to bed earlier and earlier. And I realized I'm being such a nag. They hate me because I'm making them go to bed way too early, but it's such an early time for them to get up. And finally, I just made the declaration. So children, you have to be in the car at 7:10 a.m. You choose your bedtime. Good night. I don't think any of them chose a late bedtime. I don't think any of them did. And they ended up getting an earlier bedtime than what I was making them have before, because they had to wake up so early. So when you push, the natural inclination is to push back. But if you give them the chance to choose their bedtime, there's nothing to push for. They get a choice, and they're probably going to make a good choice. So I don't think there was hardly ever a time where they made a poor choice on their bedtime. And that was just wonderful. So, but if they had missed the ride to school, they would have had to walk, and they would have not gotten a note from me.
I think Kyler was the youngest, so she got the most of this stuff, and she was the most boring high schooler. Like, we were like, want to hang out? And she's like, it's a school night. I need to be in bed.
Yes. Well, it amazed me. She came up here right before everything started, and I don't remember what she said about Love and Logic. And I said, well, you know, I didn't start out with Love and Logic because I didn't know about it. And she said, really? She didn't remember me not using Love and Logic, but she was in first grade when we started Love and Logic, so.
Not too late.
And I was just barely getting started, and then you start learning more and more, and as you do, it really helps your parenting. It really does become fun. We'll talk about that later as well.
So I got just so into that. I'm so sorry. Guiding children to solve their problems is the next handout. And we've got a little bit of time for this here, but we're gonna go through this. The idea is that once they step outside of the boundaries of the limits that have been set, so they've been given choices, they get to choose between those choices, but obviously someone's gonna step outside whatever boundaries have been set. Now they have a problem. And so now you have the opportunity to guide them to solve their own problem. And so we're gonna read through this together. I'm gonna ask you to read it. And then the final phrase will be on the screen because it's just so good. So would you read through this for us and add dad, whatever, guiding children to solve their own problems.
Absolutely. So step one is the empathy. This is how we keep from getting the sarcastic in it. You know, if you have the gift of sarcasm like I do, you don't want to use it with your children. It doesn't work. So we say things like, oh, how sad. When they come home with bad grades, oh, how sad. Or, I bet that hurts. Those type of things. We're feeling the empathy with them. We're not lecturing, okay? Step two, send the power message. What do you think you're gonna do? And quite often they're like, I don't know. Because if you haven't used love and logic all their lives, they don't realize that they can actually make a choice. They're not being told what they have to do. And so then we can offer choices. Would you like to hear what other kids have tried? At this point, offer a variety of choices that range from bad to good. It's usually best to start out with the poor choices because they're like, yeah, that won't work. And then each time a choice is offered, go on to the next step, forcing the youngster to state the consequence in his or her own words. This means that you will be going back and forth between love and logic steps 3 and 4. So when they say, well, I'm going to tell the teacher that she needs to give me an A, then we go to step 4 and we say, oh, and how will that work? We don't say, you can't tell your teacher what to do. You just let them think about it. How will that work? Have you seen anyone else in your class try to tell them that they have to give you a better grade? I wonder how that's going to go. And usually, you know, they'll say, no, I haven't had anybody do that. So maybe that won't work. But if they choose that, you know, you can say, well, I don't know. I don't know if that would work, but it is an option. Would you like to hear any more options, or have you decided on that one? And when you get a call from the teacher, you back that teacher to the hilt, because the child is obviously making a poor choice, but you're allowing them to fail forward. And then step 5, we give permission for the child to either solve the problem or not solve the problem. Sometimes we just want to put our head in the sand. So we can say, good luck, I hope that works out for you. And have no fear. If the child is fortunate enough to make a poor choice, he or she may have a double learning lesson. That we do have to make choices. Just not making a choice is still making a choice. And we do have consequences when we do that.
I just loved that we highlighted that one. Have no fear. If the child is fortunate enough to make a poor choice, he or she may have a double learning lesson. And that's where I smile, because the book, I just really do recommend the book. Like you said, funny, it's a funny read. And they really are encouraging some outrageous things like, you know, do you want to quit school and become a hobo? And like, you can put that, like, you seriously, they're recommending that you put that in the list of choices and just see. And if they're like, yeah, that one, I want to quit school, you just be like, cool, how's that going to work for you? Yeah. I mean, I just think that's so funny.
Yeah, and you offer things like, well, that sounds like fun. So how are you going to make money?
Right, like,
oh, I'll get a job. Oh, that does sound like fun. That is really cool. So how are you going to get to work? And you just keep going on. You're asking questions and making them think about it. You're not telling them that they're making a poor decision. You're letting them think it out.
And you have encouraged this so much, and it is very, very hard for me. But one thing that you have both modeled and recommended is asking those questions when they're in the thought process. And so there have been a lot of times when it has been a safety issue, like Jadwin, do not jump off of the top of this is an ongoing issue at our house, do not jump off the top of the play sets. That's like 7 feet in the air. But you have said, ask questions. And I was like, what do you think you're gonna do? And he has like a full plan. Like he's like, I'm gonna scale the side. I'm gonna stand in the middle. I'm gonna do a double flip. Truly, he has it all planned out. And when I ask, it worked. I'm like, how do you think that'll work? And he does. Well, I might hit my head, and I don't like when I hit my head. And he works through it himself, and I'm just like, that's wild. I'd just do it. So anyway, this is really, really cool. So before we move into, we're gonna take a little bit of a question and answer and a personal application time and take a little break. But there's one more handout, the next page. It's called Angry Kids. And we wanted to give this resource to you. We're not gonna read it through with you right now, but I don't know about you, I started reading parenting books before my kids were born. Kind of, Tasha, you're here. We were here expecting the first one that I really wanted to be prepared. And it's tempting for me to make a joke right now that makes me really relatable. That was like, and then I knew nothing when, I'm such an idiot. But I really was ahead for that. Like it helped. It was worth it to have that information in advance. And that's kind of what we're talking about, is making decisions before you're in the heat of a moment is helpful. But just like when you read a recipe, things can go wrong that aren't in the recipe. This is not a perfect formula, because some of us have Azalea Bold, and they're just going to be like, it's not going to work on me. I can tell you this right now. And so there's going to be times when you give a choice, they say this over and over again, when you give a choice or when they reap a consequence, that they're going to lose their mind. And I think that's why God gave me daughters, is to let me know that it doesn't all work very well all the time. But this is not talking about kids that are angry. Like, we've all known like someone that's just perpetually angry. It's talking about when kids get angry, because they're going to get angry at some point, especially in this process. And the bottom line that they're saying is never reason with an angry child. The teaching recommends that we're supposed to be a calm presence. You said a safe place for them to land. And so our job is not to convince them that we were right and they were wrong. And I told you so is kind of what you said. And it's really not even to, like, if they're angry at someone else, help them understand why they shouldn't be angry. It's just to be steady when they're unsteady. Because when the whole point of it, and that's why we wanted to give you this resource, is like when we try to be the reasonable one or the one with the answers when they're angry, we just end up becoming the bad guy. And so we wanted to make sure that resource was available. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to conclude this session, and then the third and final session of the evening is going to be about specific tools that we can begin to implement. So I think that'll be kind of the bulkiest teaching that we have. But before we go into this personal application time, I did want to open the floor for any specific questions you have about the love and logic premise that we're talking about tonight. Yes.
Sounded like you were saying that a couple things that maybe worked with your son didn't work with your daughters. Is that what you're
Talking to me? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
So for both of you, how long do you try something with a kid before you decide this isn't working?
Please, go ahead.
5 years. I have a really hard time with this. I do, because fair is so important to me. And so I don't like, and I feel like we've spent a lot of like teary conversations where I've been crying to you because everything worked so well with Jadwin. I'm just telling you, that first kid is magical. And so I was like, it's gonna work with with Brinley, and then she can like scream until she blacks out, until one of us blacks out. And it's not that she's not well behaved. A lot of these have worked, but I've had to tweak like some of the choices. But for me, it just is being willing to go back and try something different. I only know for me, I would defer to mom for general advice, but I know for me and Brian, anytime something isn't working, which we really know that that's true anytime that one of us has a panic attack or a meltdown. And for 10 years, it's never been Brian. But that's when it's like, okay, this isn't working for our family, and we have a quick powwow about what are we gonna try next. And we just immediately try something else, and we just keep throwing spaghetti until something sticks, and we know it's sticking when nobody's freaking out. So that's just how we do it. But.
That sounds real good. And sometimes it has nothing to do with gender. We had 4 girls with 4 different personalities. And I would like you to show me chapter and verse in the book of Hezekiah where it says that life is fair. It can't be fair. We try and we try and we try, but we cannot be fair on everything. Sometimes, especially with Trinity, across the room, I could give her the look and she would straighten up, and that would be once a year. With others, and I'm not going to look at any of them.
Kyra raised her hand.
I felt like I could beat the child, and I didn't, but I could beat the child until I was tired, and she would still do it again. And so you have to learn what works for each child. And most of the time, kids even realize what's fair is whatever works for that kid. So if you need to sit down and have a discussion with them, especially, for instance, a special needs child, but usually even in that case, the siblings will understand that things need to be a little bit different.
That brings up a question for me. And I'm not parenting 9 kids, but I am disciplining 9 kids at the same time for 6 hours out of the week. And so you feel like there should be rules, and the rules should be the same for all the students. The consequences should be the same for breaking the rules. But you do have 9 very different children. They're different ages. They have different personalities. They have different parents at home that discipline differently. And so how do you determine and you are, as you go through the school year or the session or whatever, figure out what this works with this kid, but it doesn't work with that kid. But how much flexibility do you have as a teacher or a parent or whatever of making it, without making it so the rules are different for everybody, having maybe a different consequence for a different child based on what you know does and doesn't work with that child, without making it like it's favoritism or something?
Yeah, I think that's the whole thing. It's what's behind it. As long as your heart isn't, spoiling a certain child and leaving another child out, as long as that's not specifically happening, you're going by what works and maybe what you know about the child's home life, that maybe a certain family never raises their voice and they're just very quiet by nature. If you raise your voice, it might be just way too much for that child to handle.
Yeah.
So knowing that and going by that, working with that is okay, as long as there isn't specific favorites and that type of thing, which I know you don't do, but just being sure.
You've told me over and over again too, which I still don't get, but it's true. It's been true over and over again. Is like kids are smart enough to know that the rules are different at different places.
Yes. In a divorce situation, dad's house has rules, mom's house has rules. We know that at school, the library, we have to be quiet. The playground, we can scream. We know these things. There are certain, in church, whatever your rules are, it seems to be a little more lax, but when we were in the Midwest, my goodness, children did not run in church. They did not raise their voice in church. And it seemed like everybody tried to parent everybody else's children, and that was good to a point. But then there were some people who didn't have very good, well-behaved children, but then tried to parent my children, and I told them, no, thank you. So, where was I going? Thank you.
Just that they understood that there's different
Yes. Some people think that kids can't understand that. They very much understand that. Please don't underestimate your children. They are much smarter than you think. I would have the babysitter come over, and I'd be spelling Trins 2. I'm like, if they behave, they can have POPCORN. She's like, hey, we get popcorn tonight. I'm like, oh. So you have to do different for every kid. It just is the way it is, and different places, there's different rules. Your kids are smart, so don't underestimate your kids.
I'm not a parent, but I am an auntie, and for the future and stuff. But how does it work when they're putting themselves in danger? Like just the other day, one of the kids was sitting on the back of the couch, and I was like, oh God, I don't want them to fall. I don't know. And so, how does that work?
Are you asking either one of us? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, the only thing that I will say is that my standard has way lowered on what is a safety issue and what isn't. Because if that was my kid sitting on the back of the couch, I might actually kind of sit down kind of hard to see if I could knock him off.
Because they're under the umbrella.
So yeah, so my standard has changed quite a bit is all I'll say. But
Yeah, if it's truly a dangerous situation, like you might want to put your hand on their ankle to make sure they're not going to fall over backwards, and just say, hey, what do you think's going to happen if you stay up here for a while? And, let them think it through. Now, if it's a 2-foot fall and they're just going to go backwards and maybe have the wind knocked out of them, that's one thing. If it's an 8-foot fall, then we got to start getting more serious. That's safety issues. And children do need to learn to obey. This is where I have a little bit of trouble with this, is children do need to learn to obey and not ask why. Do not go arguing with the children. We don't argue. Someday it's going to save their life, so we don't ask why. And we're going to cover a little bit about that later, but we don't argue with our parents. That's just a big no.
So would you say, if on a regular basis you offer options, and that's the way you go, the kids, they feel respected, they feel like they have some control of their life, but in a situation where it's like running out into the street in front of moving traffic, you're going to give a firm command, and they're going to be expected to obey, and they're going to know to respect that because you don't order them around all the time.
Exactly. And a great way to practice that is red light, green light, things like that with your children. And they start learning, that they need to stop at that moment, not 3 steps later. And as they're little, they're practicing, it's okay. But they need to get to the point where they understand immediate obedience is required. Someday it will save their life.
And if I can add to that, I actually saw this in action a few years ago. My sister-in-law has 2 children that are a bit older than mine. So my son was a baby and we were walking out in front of Target. And she is just one of the best moms I've ever known in my life. She loves her kids. They have great relationship. They're getting older now and just great relationship. And she never ever raises her voice, which I just so admire, which is why we all stopped when he was kind of dancing around and having fun. He must have been like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, and just about walked into the road, and none of us saw a speeding car coming across, and she Easton, just super loud, and we've never heard her raise her voice like that. And I didn't know a kid could stop. He literally was on his toes and just stopped like that, and the car, just like a foot from him. And she immediately comes and catches up with him because she was a little bit, I'm sorry I raised my voice, baby. But because she never did that, there was real, I was just shocked. I was like, there was real, everybody stopped because he never hears her yell. So he knew. And that just really, I internalized that because I was like, oh, it kind of like you said, your no means something, like your voice means something, they'll understand. So that was cool. Do you guys have any other questions for?
Yeah, I have read the book and I struggle with the part of the balance of choices and telling them, so what are some examples of things that you give choices for and what you would say they need to do without questioning?
Well, choices are for almost anything. It's just when it's, a dangerous circumstance or something.
So it's more that when they're asking why, we don't go down the
Yeah, the child, if there are some children that are just very logical, and Trin was very logical. She was doing full sentences before she was a year old. And if she asked why after she did it, no problem. And you could always see that just the wheels turning. And then she might ask another question and another question. She was very interested and just loved to do that. But she wasn't being defiant. But when a child says why, that's kind of like that delayed obedience is passive aggressive. They don't need to know why. God gave you to mommy and daddy to keep you safe. And we expect you to obey immediately because we are trying to keep you safe.
And then one more question.
Yes.
So is it okay for them you were saying it's not totally dangerous. One of my children loves to climb on the TV stand.
How high is it?
It's 7. No, it's
As
not.
high
It's-
as it stays.
Yeah, it's not that high.
And
You can let them drop.
you've repeatedly told them not to do that. and she still does that.
Well, she just, yeah, she simply forgets, but we know that's not.
Okay, is there anything dangerous on it? That if it broke, it's not
Empty, yeah.
okay. So, and if it falls on her or she falls, is it going to be dangerous?
Isn't that the question? Like, yeah, will she die?
She said she would jump on the couch to see if the kid
I
would
didn't
fall.
say jump, I said sit down a little hard.
I would, if I've said that, I might say something like I did with the jacket, something like, well, I've told you not to jump on that, but you keep making that choice. I wonder what's going to happen. And just let her figure out that she's probably going to fall.
Yeah, because I feel like that's the one thing that I nag.
Yeah, we don't want to nag. So just, you've already said don't climb. So probably just one sentence. I wonder what's going to happen. Well, we'll see.
That's terrifying. Jessica?
Okay, can I just add to like their story? Okay, so say, what if they do it? So what if our child breaks a very expensive TV? How do we go about, okay, how are you gonna earn that money? Or it's also a lot of money.
Well, if it's something that really means something to you, I would say put it up high or put it somewhere where it can't be broken. Put some extra mounts on the TV to keep it from being broken.
Okay, definitely.
Because, if it's I don't know, I'm so tech savvy, you just don't even know. But
If it's a really expensive boombox,
so it's a $4,000 TV. I mean, you want to protect that. And that's part of respecting people's things.
Okay.
But you also don't want to clear everything out. So, maybe have some knickknacks around that are from a garage sale or something. And when they break it, you don't care, but now they have to earn it to pay it back, even if it's a quarter.
Okay, and I also wanted to add, say they're not being respectful to their own toys. Like, you were saying if you break sister's toy, then you're gonna have to earn money to buy a new one. What if it's theirs?
A good question is, do you want to, okay,
Can I throw it away? Like,
yeah, you could, but I would let them make the choice though. Gear lofts take care of their things. Do you want to take care of that? Or would you like me to give it to someone who would really appreciate that toy? And if they say give it away, hey, that's all the better for you, less junk for you to pick up. And if they say I want to take care of it, great. But if they're right back in 5 minutes to destroying it, you just say, oh, I guess I got to make that decision. And you put it up high and you go give it away to someone who could really use it.
yeah, thank you.
and you're so good at this. And I just, going back to the electronics thing, I know that you're actually doing, like, in the toy box at Nana and Papa's house are a couple of laptops and like half a dozen remotes that no longer work, because they realized, well, they have a need, they desire to play with those things, and so they've got these old electronics that nobody's using anymore. And so I think that's the fun part too, is like, it's not just making them behave, but it's also like meeting the need or whatever it is, that tactile need or whatever it might be, the climbing need, maybe they need more outdoor time or whatever. You're really good at that. I enjoy that. You probably have some more scenarios in your head. The last session is going to be tools and tricks. Like one of the things you just mentioned is going to be an enforceable statement and everything. I think we're going to really appreciate those. We're going to take a 6-minute break. We're going to put a couple of questions on the screen that you can copy down to look at later. You might have a little time to address now, but you can also grab a snack or a drink or go into the bathroom if you need to. And then we'll head into that teaching number 3. So enjoy.